everybody. Time for another installment on my teaching on Elijah the prophet. This will be called The Still Small Voice, and it'll be Elijah part 10. And he came there unto a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said unto him, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. And he said, Go forth and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains, and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake, and after the earthquake a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire a still small voice. And it was so, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle, and went out and stood in the entering of the cave. And behold, there came a voice unto him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? 1 Kings 19, 9-13. A very dejected and exhausted Elijah leaves the promised land and heads south, basically reversing the Exodus. When he arrives at Sinai, he found his way up to a cave. But the text says, the cave, perhaps the well-known cleft of the rock Moses had once stood in, as indicated by Keel and Delich below. And I quote, appearance of God at Oreb. When Elijah arrived at Oreb, he went into the cave, the definite article in, and he has a Hebrew word, with the obvious connection between the appearance of God, which follows here, and that which was described in Exodus 33, and points back to the cleft in the rock, in which Moses had stood while the glory of God passed by. And there he spent the night. Keel and Delich, 1 Kings 19. There the word of the Lord comes to him, asking him, What are you doing here, Elijah? Elijah is recapitulating the experience of Moses after the golden calf, in which he climbs the same mountain to intercede for the sinning people. And I quote from Exodus 32, It came to pass on the morrow that Moses said to the people, You've sinned a great sin, and now I will go up unto the Lord. Peradventure I'll make an atonement for your sin. And Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Oh, this people have sinned a great sin, and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written. Exodus 32, 30-32. But this Moses figure, Elijah, prays against the sinning children of Israel. And I quote, And he said, I've been very jealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, thrown down thine altars, and slain thy prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left, and they seek my life to take it away. 1 Kings 19:10. Now everything he prayed was true. The answer of the Lord to his prophet, he summoned his servant out of the cave so that Yahweh might pass by him, similar to the events in Exodus 33-34, in which Yahweh passed by Moses, revealing his name. In the case of Moses, he had asked God to show me your glory, and the answer from God was a revelation of the name, that is, the attributes and perfections of God. That is the glory of God. In this case, that of Elijah, he had poured out his frustrations and sorrow at the sins of Israel, even in spite of the mighty demonstration of the power of God on Mount Carmel. Would any of it matter? Elijah seems to have come in the mode of, It's time for you to work, O Lord, for they have made void thy law. But in the cave, at the cleft of the rock, God passed by in the power of a mighty destructive wind. So strong was the wind that it was splitting rocks along the face of the cave and the mountain. The text says, though, literally, it was not in the wind that Yahweh was. Next, an earthquake came, and again, it was not in the earthquake that Yahweh was. And finally, Elijah saw fire go by, and again, it was not in the fire that Yahweh was. The point is not that Yahweh doesn't use those things. After all, Elijah had just witnessed with the entire congregation of Israel on the mountaintop of Carmel fire fall from heaven and lick up sacrifice, stones, and even the water poured into the ditch. Earthquakes, tempests, and fires, they're all manifestations of God's awesome power indeed. But when the sin reaches its apex and people seem to be incorrigible, there have been times when God has employed these powers and others, such as flooding the entire earth and sparing only 8 people. The wrath of God revealed is what happens when people become unreachable. But where is God, if not in the fire, the earthquake, and the tempest? What is God's preferred method of drawing men and women and revealing himself to the hearts of sinners and saint alike? God is in the still small voice. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle, reverently positioned for worship, and he stepped forward closer to the sound of the gentle wind. God speaks, and in his dealings with men, he has bound himself by his own word. In his mercy, he would plead, convict, convince, argue, persuade men, and as a last resort, he has the power to do earthquakes, fire, and the wind. His power, though, is in the gospel. He uses the Bible and preachers and teachers as well as witnesses to reach fallen men. Parallel to the revelation given to Moses, who also stood in that cave as the Lord passed by, God revealed himself afresh and anew to his prophet as being slow to anger, abounding in mercy and goodness and truth. Edersheim again perhaps says it best in his Old Testament history. With reverence be it said that in the mood in which Elijah had come, no more fitting answer could have been made to him than this awful and glorious self-manifestation of Jehovah. If the Lord himself had not been in the desolating messengers of terror, why should Elijah have expected it in the judgments which he was commissioned to execute? Nay, if Elijah himself had come forth to worship, not in the storm or the earthquake or the fire, but had waited for the presence of the Lord in the soft, gentle, stilling sound, why should he wonder if the revival of Israel's worship awaited a similar manifestation? But God would, in the meantime, take care of his own cause. Again, the Lord asked his prophet, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And again, Elijah poured out his complaint and his belief that he was the only faithful one left. But was it really as absolutely hopeless in Israel as Elijah had come to believe? Was Elijah sure that Carmel and his confrontation with Baal had been of no effect? And I quote, this is what the Lord told him, "Yet I have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed unto Baal, and every mouth which hath not kissed him." 1 Kings 19:18. God will always preserve for himself a non-compromising remnant, a people who will love him and stay true no matter what befalls them. And of course, God will bring others in before the fire falls, for fall it must. How God would rather have men listen to his still small voice. But that won't keep him from applying other far more violent means in order to undergird his holiness and glory. So Elijah is given a threefold commission to undertake the fulfillment of God's purposes. And the Lord said unto him, "Go return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus. And when you come, anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shalt thou anoint to be king over Israel. And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, of Abel-Meholah, shalt thou anoint to be prophet in thy room. And it shall come to pass that him that escapes the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and him that escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay." Shalom, and God bless you.